Hi, I'm Lucy McCann. We're camped at the Georgina River. It's at a little town called Camberwell, and it's on the border between Queensland and Northern Territory in Australia. The lilies here remind me so much of Monet's that we were lucky enough to see over at Chiffony and in France, and I'd like to do a painting here. I'm very excited about it. Look at the light that we've got. So let's begin. Let's come back a little bit so we're stable. I'm going to look at the scene straight out in front of me there. I have two drawers that come out to the side and to the front so as I can reach my palette more easily. I'm actually going to tape my paper on with masking tape on all four sides. I'd have to press it down quite firmly today. I like to put water into my two containers, and that allows me then to get a drop of water into each of my pigment that's in my palette. This reconstitutes the watercolour, and so when I've drawn, the pigment will be nice and juicy and ready for me to use. Okay, I'm going to just do a drawing so as we've got some idea of where those trees are in the background. They're not all the same height, some are taller than others. We've got lovely trunk in this main tree on this side that comes to the bank. The bank's got some lovely greens on it and some darks. And we can put most of these branches in and trunks in with our brush, so I don't have to draw those in detail. Then we come along and we've got lilies on that far bank through here. I'm not going right to the edge of the page because I don't want this lilies, all these white lilies through here, to create a horizontal line that's going to take my eye out. So we just need to indicate a few of those. There's also some pale lily pads way back here that I'll need to suck out when I come through with my wash. And as we come down here, we've got slightly more, and then I start seeing lilies. They're in silhouette, they've got dark side to them. I'm looking into the light. So I'm just going to place in a couple of those now. If it's still water and there's no lily pads around them, they will have a reflection, but in this case it has a lily pad around it. So we pop that in. And I'm trying to get a pattern happening. So I'm going to utilise some of the other lily pads that are over there. And they're not all separate back here. There's quite a lot that are joined. Quite a big group here. So I'll just put in some lily pads here. It's quite a nice group here, and then there's the water in between them. And from this main section now, it's got me down to the lilies that interested me most. And they are one straight up and got quite a tall stem. And it actually has lily pads underneath it, around it, that come right out here and come back in. We've got more and more as we're coming down to the bank here. And a lily is not like a daisy. It's got bits that come up the top and across. And then they open from four bottom sections for the flower. And even on the lily pads here, and there's quite a lot of them just in this section, there's a shadow, a beautiful shadow that's coming across them that I'll incorporate. This one's a bit on the same angle, but his flower is not. Goes on another angle, back the other way. And there's no reflection there. We've got lily pads, broken lily pads around it. All right, coming across over here, we've got more lily pads. I think it's too many, so I'm only going to put in a couple through here. And then that gets me to a couple of beautiful little pods. So I'm going to put them in. One goes straightish up. And then there's a lovely flower next to it, a bit taller than that. And it's coming in here. There's also another pod here. I think it'd be nice to put another one in. They're not quite on the same level. And there's no reflections there. We've got the lily pad. There's also shadows that I can see from this pod that comes across, and this lily that comes across, which I'm going to pop in. Down here there's a lot of lily pads that are being pushed up, and they're quite lovely shapes, so we'll put some arbitrary ones of those in. All right, I think that's fine. I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to do some masking, and then we'll put the first wash on. I'm going to put some masking fluid on. That will allow my white of my paper to be saved. So I decanter a little bit into another lid from my bottle. Then I have a masking fluid tool that Barry made for me, and it's just 640 GSM paper, cut to a point. Just going to do some little indication of the lilies back over on the bank. They won't remain white by the end of my painting. They will have to go cooler blue, but at the moment we'll reserve some back there. So I'm going to come into the middle ground and put on my masking fluid on my lilies now. There's just too many of them back there for me to cut around when I want to do a lovely big wash. These big shapes are all joined together. I just see them as white out there, or light. Wow, even my masking fluid's drying quickly. And just a tiny bit at the top of this one. Because his stem's all dark. Okay, that's good for masking. Now we just need to let that dry. Okay, so I'm going to come from top to bottom with a wash of the colours that I see and the value I see. I just wet the paper a little bit. This is just my dirty water. I just made my wash and then thought that I should wet the paper since it's quite dry out here in the centre of Australia. Okay, now I'm going to start with the tones and the colours I see back there. This is just the lightest colours that I'm seeing as I'm looking back there, and I'll go with the darks in a little bit. Sort of a warm purpley brown in the background here. And it's quite dark, and where the water's hitting, where the wind is hitting, we've got quite a lot of disturbance. Just running some water through here now because I see it is lightening up a little bit simply because of the wind. Some of these sparkles that are being caused by my brush stroke now are probably not a bad idea to leave. I do see a lot of sparkle and bits and pieces happening out there. Just make sure they're shapes that you can use. Just going to add a little bit of warmth and depth to this foreground part. It's a beautiful mauve here where it's in front of me. Maybe even a little warmer. But there are some lovely little lily shapes that are pushed up through here that I think add to this interesting part at the front. Sometimes it's hard to do the calligraphy shapes slowly, so you just pop them in. I've got my brush on the side. I'm just going to drag it in so as we get nice shapes for the trees. I'm watching the skyline to see what shape I need. And then I'm adding some limbs, trunks. And we've got to get a bit of distance happening in here as well. I don't want to make too much of these background sections. A little bit of water if you've got too dark instead of pigment. And a little touch of green coming through here as well. Now I want to come down on the bank though, because that's where my lilies are. Now because of my dry brush marks here, I've already got little sparkles happening for the lilies, but I'll still let the masking fluid do its job. Alright, I'm actually at the darkest part of the bank now. And now we've got to come down into a little bit of a reflection, which is becoming less and less as we've got the breeze coming up. Now it comes down past this main lily to about here somewhere, so let's just drag this down. Remember, I've got a wet section here. Once I get to here somewhere, I can start allowing some of these trees to have some impact. The taller tree will be further down with what he's creating. So your brush can go in all directions through here, doesn't have to stick to one way or the other. I'm going to put a little more depth into the trees in the background. Don't think we need much on this side. Okay, now we'll see how we go getting a water wash in. I just wet that first. Oh, that's a nice colour, isn't it? I do see it is a bit darker, so that's what I'm trying to do here. And now we're probably just a little too warm. Just going to see, can I suck out a couple of lighter sections over here? Which I'm not actually going to get very successfully. We'll work at one here. That's better. Maybe one in here. All right, let's take the masking fluid off. The paper really needs to be dry Mine's not entirely dry, so I'm being careful. I can see it's still damp because of the buckle in it. Okay, now the masking's off, and we've arrived at quite a nice time of the day because the lily pads are not white now as I'm looking out. They've just got a very pale greeny blush on them. I see it as a palish green, so I'm just going to go with that and see what we arrive at. Not too bad, I think. I don't need it too warm back here because we don't want the lily pads to come too far forward. And when I'm using this filbert brush, I tend to blur things together with it. It's great for that. It also softens edges of the masking fluid if they're a bit harsh, a bit placed. Maybe a little dark, so go with some water. Water's your best friend in watercolour. Blur some edges so they fit in together. Don't be afraid of pushing your paper. It will take a fair bit of punishment. Maybe one that's lighter again in tone, so picking up the pigment that's on my paper and blurring it so it becomes a little more purple, a little more interesting with the colour change. Okay, now we're down to the main lilies, and luckily for me they're still in silhouette. However, I can see some of their centres now. Whether we choose to put that in or not, let's see how we go. So it's a lime greenish top to it, and then the purple as well. I'm trying now to make this more as interesting, if not more interesting, with what I see. And we've got a lovely blue hue on this main lily. It's a purpley blue. Then into the green. But it's only on the lower edges that the green is. And then we've got a lovely yellow in the centre of it. Straight out here I think we'll do that. So I put the yellow centre in that lily, and I see it as being darker at the bottom. So I've included that in its stem down to the dark patch that's nearly on the water. Now I'm just going to move across to the next little one. And his stem is lighter at the top and darker at the bottom as well. And I'll get some darks in some of these little bits. A little bit of dark here under this. These ones that are in the middle ground, they can have a tiny bit of dark on them. Over to this lily, and it is green as well at the top, and then paler as it goes down, and the pods are darker. Okay, now I think I'll just give all these These ones are wash, pale, and then slightly darker as it's coming towards me. Okay, that's a bit too dark. I want it a bit paler than that. It's slightly darker as it comes here towards me. Okay, and just a bit over here so we don't look out the edge of our page too much. Oh, and I just went over my foreground lily. Do I decide to keep it or do I take it out? I'll put it in as a dark. I'm just going to indicate some of these bases of the lily pads in the foreground, just so they sit on water. It happens more when they're in the shade. There is a lot going on down here in the front. We don't want to overdo it. So I'm lucky that all the little yellow flowers have come out, and I'd like to spatter some of them into my foreground. So I've mixed up some cad yellow. Oh, that's lovely. It was interesting because they shut in the night and didn't stay opened. And I just would like to get some gouache. Just remember how I painted over that one accidentally. So I'm just going to add him back in. And because we've put that on now, it's not going to look as white as the paper. So I'm going to introduce another lily that's down, nearly going back into the water down here. Okay, so that's another way you can add white back in if you need to. I'm just mixing a tone now for the leaves. I don't want to take too much away at the top of my painting from the background, but I do think it could be helpful coming across the painting a little more, and we get leaves that drop down here. I think this has to be a bit darker, maybe a little bit thicker than I did it. And I think we need another one now I've done that. I think I need one that's coming from up here or back down into the work. Maybe come through here. It is coming through there, that little bush. But all in all, that's fine. I'm going to take the tape off. Another amazing spot. I hope you've enjoyed the painting. I've had a great time doing it. And until we meet at another beautiful scene somewhere, bye for now.